All right, so I'm gonna try to make this as quick and easy as possible for everyone to follow. I just got a new mic too, so hopefully it sounds good in the videos. Before we get started, I'm not a mechanic or anything like that. I'm literally just standing in my garage with a toolbox and some tools. So I'll just get that out of the way. Today I wanted to show you how to clean your MAP sensor, which is this one. And I just wanted to talk about the importance of your aftermarket intake filter placement on your 2015 plus Subaru WRX. This one in particular is a 2018, but you know, not much has changed between the years. So everything I talk about in this video will apply to your car, assuming it's a 2015 plus. So the reason I wanted to make this video is because I've been seeing a bunch of posts on the forums regarding abnormal air fuel trims, and I don't want to get into too much of the details, but I'm referring to running too rich or running too lean. So basically, if your fuel trims are positive, it's an indication that your car is running lean, since your ECU has to add more fuel to the mixture, and then vice versa. If your fuel trim is negative, it's an indication that your car is running rich, since the ECU has to reduce fuel from the air fuel mixture. And these values are indicated by the aflearning and afcorrection on the access port. At least that's what I monitor on mine. I know it's not directly correlated, but cleaning these sensors can help stabilize the fuel trim. Before doing anything with your car, I suggest reaching out to your tuner, assuming you have anything other than an OTS map. You know, if anyone knows anything about your car, it would be your tuner. So I suggest reaching out to see if they can provide you with any kind of direction. They'll most likely ask you for some data logs, and if they do, don't slack on those. Get it to them as soon as possible, since I know those guys are super busy. If you've checked every single connection on the car and your fuel trims are still messed up and you can't figure out why, just don't throw your car away just yet. First, see if this method works. A set of hex keys would do this, would do the job. A 2mm or 2.5 millimeter to be specific for the mass airflow, the MAF sensor bolts, and 8mm socket and a 10mm socket. And this is the mass airflow sensor cleaner that I use, and I use this for both the MAP sensor and the MAF sensor. It works really well, and you can just pick it up from your local auto parts store like AutoZone or something. And yeah, just use some gloves to protect your hands from this stuff, because it can't be good for you. I just switched over to the GoPro here, so hopefully you guys can see everything that I'm seeing. You want to start by taking the cover off of your aftermarket intake. This one is the Cobb big SF intake, and I don't usually, you know, use power tools for this, but for the, you know, I just wanted to make it as quick and easy as possible, so I only use it to remove the bolts on here, but I still manually screw them back on. And another contributing factor to the AF numbers was the placement of this intake. I don't know if you could see, but I drew a line right there, and that's exactly an inch from the tip of the intake tubing, and I literally hit that same mark every single time to maintain the consistency of the numbers. When I was talking about playing with the intake filter placement, I was referring to the angle of it. At one point, the angle of my intake filter was a little crooked, or it was straight, but it needed to be crooked actually. So that actually helped my numbers by a whole bunch. So step 2 would be to take this off, and for that you'll need the 8mm. Usually grab it from the front and lift up. Another thing that you can do, which I won't do this because there's a bunch of videos of it out there, is to clean your intake filter. I need to drive the car tomorrow, and not sure if it's wise to clean it now and risk it not being dry. So I'm not going to do that for this video. Just look it up. There's a bunch of them out there on how to clean your intake filter. I should do that at some point though. So actually, I just got a headlamp so you guys can see where the MAF sensor is. So that's the next step, would be to remove the MAF sensor. it's because it's all the way down there. And just take your time. You should be able to get it out in no time. And there's that line I was talking about. I hope you guys can see that. Okay. Here we go. This plug right here, I know when it gets moist, it kind of can skew your numbers too. You know, I've sprayed it with a MAF sensor cleaner before, and it seemed to have done fine, but you know, this is pretty clean, so I'm just gonna leave it as is for now. This is the MAF sensor itself. Be very careful with this piece. All right, and I'm gonna set that aside for now. In the meantime, I'm gonna remove the MAP sensor. So my bolt right here is actually a replacement. I had to replace this on my own because I stripped it. You know, this entire thing is a plastic piece, and so at one point when I was cleaning it, I stripped it, but that was a long time ago. So mine is a 10 mil. I'm not sure what the stock one was, but you know, you can figure that out. And make sure you take the bolt and the washer and you set that aside far away from this, and I'll show you why in a second. Be very careful when you're prying it out. Give it a good couple tugs. There we go. So as you can see, this is the MAP sensor. It's a little oily, and that is completely normal, you know, for it to be a little dirty. That's why we're cleaning it. Okay, so you just pop that off, and yeah, take both sensors, and we'll move on to the next step, which is to actually spray it down. So just aim. Make sure you get that center right there. I'm gonna turn the light off. There we go. So do not use anything to wipe that down unless you have like a super fine like swab or something like that. But for me, I just spray it, and it's usually just enough. Just like that. I know it looks unnecessary, but trust me, that's how you use this stuff. The next thing is the MAF sensor itself, which is the one that came from the intake side. So again, just kind of aim. I'm gonna pop the light back on here. So aim for that center where you see all those components in there. That's what I usually like to clean. And yeah, it gets a little wet, but again, it dries off like really quickly, so you can't damage anything. Just, here, let me move over here real quick. So now I took off the straw, and I wanted to, I would spray in there just like that. Okay. This one again. And now we just wait a couple minutes, or a few minutes, for it to dry. I want to make sure you plug it in before you push it in the slot right here so it doesn't fall out. And then just screw it in with the 2 bolts. Now that I got it installed, it is time to put your intake filter back on. And again, I suggest after you put this back in place, cover this part, use the cover to cover it, but don't screw it in yet, and you'll see why. We're gonna watch our numbers from the access port, and this is the part where I was talking about where you might need to play with your intake filter placement until you see the correct values, or the ideal values, I should say. So again, there's that line I was referring to, and you just kind of want to make sure that it's on there, on that line every single time. Then you want to just cover this, but don't screw it in just yet. Alright, and lastly, you want to put the map sensor back on, the manifold right here. Oh, I should plug it in first. There we go. And be very careful not to drop anything in here. If you do that, you're on your own, man. You're screwed. And make sure it is straight right here. And just tighten it just enough. Don't over tighten it. Again, this is very fragile. It's plastic. Alright, so I'm in the car right now just waiting for it to warm up. I just started it, so these numbers won't be accurate. Earlier when I mentioned the AF numbers, I was referring to the AF learning, that one right there to the left, and then the AF correction numbers to the right. So one thing to keep in mind is, again, I just started the car, so these numbers won't be accurate, and also when you drive the car, these numbers would change. It'll never be at a 0 as much as we want it to be as soon as you drive. So as soon as you rev the car, it'll literally change. See, one thing to keep in mind is that you never want to focus on the min and the max, these smaller numbers right here. The only thing I focus on is that large number up above right here, these two, which are the sustained values. And yeah, I know there's a certain amount that's acceptable, but again, one thing to keep in mind is the lower the better, that's all. And I can't emphasize enough, play with your intake filter placement, assuming you have an aftermarket one. If you have any questions, just type them below. And yeah, thank you for watching. Please subscribe, and that's all.